Hello everyone, welcome to Solow's classes. I'm Nirupam and I welcome you here once again. So today I'll be discussing on growth and development. Okay, so this will be an introduction to growth and development. So in economic theory, this topic on this discussion growth and development occupies an important position because here what we actually try to look is this: we would like to look at the factors that determine this growth and development of an economy. Now the question which normally comes to our mind is that why this forms an important part or this part of discussion on in economic discipline. The reason is this: like anything which we talk about, especially let's say when we're talking about macroeconomics. So macroeconomics, we are basically interested about the national income accounting, then what are the different components of national income, that is how the national income is being spent, that is behind consumption, investment and purchase of government, purchase of goods and services by the government, as well as net exports, as well as what we are spending. Now the question is this: we are very much interested that how each of these components, that is how consumption, investment and government purchase goods and services vary and how they grow over a period of time, and in the same way how the national income also grows over a period of time. Now when we also talk about this macroeconomics as a discipline, we also talk that how over a period of time the per capita income is also increasing. Let's say when an economy is growing, side by side the population of the country also tends to grow, and hence the labor force also grows. So when the economy is growing, we would like to see that how it is impacting the standard of life, because parts of these questions are not answered by the disciplines of microeconomics or macroeconomics, but this is being addressed specifically by this discussion of the discipline on growth and development, sub-discipline. Now, when we talk about growth, what do we mean by growth? So, if we start with the discussion process, how this thought process actually evolved over a period of time. So, when we are talking about growth, growth in economics basically means a sustained. So, this term is very important. So, there should not be any, it should not be in any fits and starts, but it should be a very much sustained. That means it should be consistent. First thing, it should be consistent. Sustained increase in national income over a period of time at constant prices. That means there should be a clear trend. It should not be something that it's a random phenomenon. That means it is happening in this year and it is not happening in the next, and again you are seeing some steep jump, again there is a fluctuation. So the fluctuation should be minimized as much as possible. There should be a sustained increase in the national income over a period of time, and there should be clear trend. So there should be an upward trend which will be visible when we are actually dealing with this time series data on the national income. Now, this was the way how the thought process has evolved in the economic growth. But when we look beyond, we will see that how this concept of growth itself has limitations. Why itself has limitations? As I said right when I started the discussion, is that we would like to see that how the standard of living is changing, because ultimately the goal of an economics as a subject in practical terms is to study the factors that is determining the growth and development in an economy, and how it is, and what are the factors that are impacting the standard of living, and what should be done to affect the standard of living for the better. Now, when we are talking of the standard of living, basically we mean that to have a good standard of living, we also need to have a good level of income with an individual or with a household, given household. So that means essentially it also boils down that how the change is happening in terms of the growth in per capita income, to be very precise. That means even I'm talking the household level, but when I'm talking the household level, let's say if there are n number of members, so each member should have, per member there should be also an increase in the amount of national income, amount of the income, household income, per capita increase should be there, which will help me to command more goods and services that I prefer to consume. So when this is happening, that means now the growth should not be, so this is how the purpose of growth they can evolve, that it should not be just a sustained increase in national income over a period of time at constant prices, but it should be sustained increase in national income per capita over a period of time. That means now we are not just incorporating the growth rate of the national income, but side by side we are also considering the growth rate in the population. So that means after accounting for the growth rate in population, by how much is the national income growing in a sustained way over a period of time. Because it might happen, let's say, let us consider the example that when we are talking, if we take the example for a country like India, we always talk about that even if the growth is something, let's say, if I talk about the Hindu rate of growth, so there is a term which you might be quite familiar with, which you might have heard, is the Hindu rate of growth. So the Hindu rate of growth basically wanted to show a very low rate of growth in the economy of India, which used to happen in the 70s as well as in the 80s. So what was this Hindu rate of growth? Hindu rate of growth, if you see that the economy was growing at a rate of 2.5% or let's say hardly 3% per annum. Now at that point of time, the population of the country was growing at a higher rate. Let's say it was growing at a rate of at least 2% per annum. So whatever growth we were achieving in terms of your growth in national income was neutralized, or its effect was being nullified by an equal, if not a greater rate of increase of growth rate of the increase in the population, growth in the population. So that means if I want to have a better standard of living, it also means in a way that my per capita income should also be growing in a sustained way. And when my per capita income needs to grow in a sustained way, it means that it is not just the growth in national income, but it also should take into account that how fast the national income is growing in relation to the growth in the population of the country. Now, if I talk about the country like India, even for other countries, probably a growth rate of 6 to 7% might be sufficient enough. But in a country like India, where the population is growing very fast, though the population growth rate has bit slowed down in the last 10-15 years, but still the population growth rate which we have is one of the highest in the world. So when we talk about a high population growth rate, that means to increase my standard of living, and hence to increase my growth rate, increase in per capita income, I also need to have a more faster growth rate in my national income. So that's why when you see that a lot of people who are interested about this debate and discussion on growth and development of India, they always vouch for a double-digit growth, because this double-digit growth will then be able to account for the high growth rate of population, and even after accounting for that will also lead to a much higher growth rate in income per capita than what we are having now. So this is the basic concept which we understand by growth and by the growth. Now when we come to that concept of development, prior to let's say when this discipline actually started under economics, so we used to use the term growth and development interchangeably. But over a period of time, the experience has shown that this is not something which can be used interchangeably. In fact, there is a well-marked distinction between these two terms, that is growth and development. Now that's why we are always very careful as economists or students of economics to have a distinction between these two words. So let this thing be very clear that there is a distinction, and I will tell you why there is a distinction. Now I think now we all know that what we understand by growth. Growth basically we understand in economics terms is a sustained increase in national income per capita over a period of time. So there should be a clear trend. Now when we come to development, so when we are coming to development, the concept of development, it has also got two concepts. So one is a traditional view, how we look at, and one is a modern view. So when we look in terms of the traditional view, so if you have studied, let's say, the national income in macroeconomics, so basically when we are talking about the national income, we divide the different components of the national income, or let's say when we are talking about GNP, we are talking about the different components of GNP. So basically when we talk about the components of GNP, broadly we divide the national product which has been produced, or the GDP which has been produced under three main sectors, that is agriculture, industry, and the service sector. So this, and also they are also known interchangeably as the primary sector, which is agriculture and allied activities, the industrial sector, which is manufacturing, and the service sector, which is the secondary sector, which is the manufacturing sector, as well as the tertiary sector, which is the services sector. Now when we talk about the development, so these are the three main sectors of the economy. These are the three main sectors by which we divide all the economic activities that takes place in an economy. Now when we talk about the development in a traditional sense, basically we stress on the fact that as the economy is evolving, let's say as an economy of a country is evolving, so to begin with, any economy in its nascent stage, most of the people are actually employed in the primary sector. That means most of the people are employed in agriculture and allied activities, and very few are employed in the industrial sector or the secondary sector, and even much lesser number of people employed in the tertiary or the services sector. So to begin with, the national income, major component of the national income comprises of the product. GNP of the GDP comprises of the product from the agricultural sector. Now, as the economy is evolving, what is happening over a period of time? The economy starts growing, and also over a period of time, the national income also keeps on growing, and with time, the national income per capita also keeps on increasing. Now, when the disposable income keeps on changing at the hand of the consumer, they start demanding more goods apart from the goods that are produced in the agricultural sector. So they will be demanding much more of consumer goods, consumer durables. So as this happens, what happens? The industrial sector also starts growing. So when the industrial sector starts growing, the labor force, a major chunk of labor force, which are employed in the agriculture sector, start shifting and gets employed in the industrial sector. So this is a structural transformation which is happening in the economy in terms of the composition of the national product. So over a period of time, as the income increases further, then people also start demanding more services in terms of the banking, financial services, hospitality, tourism, and other, you can pick up any other services. So now there is again a shift of the labor force now from the industrial sector to the services sector. So over a period of time, what is happening is this: as the economy grows and evolves, the structural transformation happens. So first, the structural transformation. So this is where the traditional view actually plays out in the development economics, as for the traditional view of the development is concerned, that there should be not only growth in national income per capita, sustained growth in national income per capita period of time, but there should also be a structural change in the economy in terms of the shift of the labor force, first from the primary sector of the agricultural sector to the secondary of the manufacturing sector, and then gradually from the manufacturing sector or the secondary sector to the tertiary of the service sector. So as this transformation happens over a period of time, first the share of agricultural sector in the national product decreases, and that of the tertiary and the secondary sector increases, and as the economy evolves further, the share of the secondary of the manufacturing sector falls, and that of the tertiary of the service sector rises. So over a period of time, now what is happening is that the tertiary sector will have the highest proportion of people or the labor force in economy employed, as well as it will be contributing the highest proportion of the national product, of the domestic product. Now, if we look this is a very interesting aspect, because this is how the traditional view of the development holds. Because we know that the thought process is this, that the income which you are earning, per capita income, will keep on increasing as you start shifting to the more productive sectors in terms of the productivity per unit of factors of production. So in the implication of this traditional view of development is this, that the agriculture, the productivity of the factors of production are lowest in the agricultural sector and is highest in the tertiary sector, and hence the payments that are made out to the factors of production will be highest in the tertiary sector, and hence that will also impact the growth in the national income or the per capita national income. So as the economy shifts to the tertiary sector, the per capita national income also grows in such a way that it helps to support a much better and a higher standard of living. Now, when you come to a country like India, we will see it's quite an interesting and quite a peculiar aspect. Is this, that though the proportion or the share of contribution of the agricultural sector in terms of the national product has fallen below 20%. Now it is around hovering around 12 to 15% of the economy. But and that of the tertiary sector is now around 60, around 60, if not higher percent proportion of the economy. But when we look in terms of the employment, so when we look in terms of the employment, we will find that still now around 50% of the labor force in the Indian economy is still employed in the agricultural sector, and the rest are employed in between the two sectors, that is the tertiary as well as the secondary sector. So what has happened in case of India is this, that the structural transformation has not been complete. Why it has not been complete? Though the proportion of contribution from the tertiary sector in the national output is now dominant, but in terms of the employment of the labor force, the structural transformation is not dominant. So what has happened over a period of time is this, that it has created some sort of a wage. So the wage is this, as you can understand, as I said earlier, that the productivity of the factors of production is much more higher in the tertiary sector than in the agricultural sector. Now, combined with the fact that 50%, around 50% of the labor force is still employed in the agricultural sector, and the rest are employed in the industrial as well as the services sector, which means that there is a large section of the employed population, and hence a large section of the population which has a much lower per capita income, and there is again there is a very small proportion of the employed force, and hence a small proportion of the population which has a much higher per capita income. So this has created, due to the incomplete structural transformation, or due to the structural transformation not being completed properly, it has now created some sort of a dichotomy in the economy. So this is something which we will be trying to understand as we progress, that why this dichotomy has existed still now in Indian economy, and how it is impacting the growth and development process. So this is about the traditional view of development. Now when we talk about the modern view, so when we are talking about the modern view is not that there should not just be the structural transformation, because even when the structural transformations happen, if you take the examples of other developing countries or the emerging economies in the world, the structural transformation has been complete not only in terms of the contribution of the growth or contribution of the factors of contribution of the sector, but also in terms of the labor force. But still, what is being found is this, that there is inequality in terms of the per capita income. So development not just means that there should be structural transformation, shift of the labor force from the primary sector to the secondary and then to the tertiary sector, but also there should be the impacts of the growth should be well distributed amongst all the segments of the population. That means if I talk in terms of the proportion of population vis-a-vis proportion of national income, so there should not be, it should be ideally that 1% of every population, if we pick up them, if you are ordering the population in terms of their income level, so each and every percentile of the population should be enjoying ideally around a percentile of the national income. But what is happening is this, that this is falling much lower. So if you are at the lower percentile of the income, lower percentile of population in terms of the income, we will find that they are commanding much lesser resources compared to the higher percentile of the population. So in that sense, when you are talking about development, it is not just the structural transformation, but also a well distribution of all the benefits of the growth of the economy. Now, a critical factor that comes into fact when we are talking about the well-being, so basically it is to have a better standard of living, we should also have a better quality of life. So this is where the sense approach of the capabilities, approach of the quality of life approach comes up. So where Professor Amukrishan is actually talking about that development does not mean just an increase in per capita income or increase in growth or just structural transformation, but also the improvement in the capabilities of the individuals. So whatever they would want to pursue, there should be complete freedom. So there should be total freedom from ignorance and want. So the basic needs and the basic entitlements that are required for an individual to satisfy the acquirement of the capabilities, so that he or she can pursue whatever he or she wants to pursue and enjoy the fruits of the growth should be there. So it might happen that even when an economy is having a higher per capita growth rate, even when an economy still has a higher participation of the population in the agriculture, in the secondary sector and the tertiary sector, it might still happen that there is a wide gap in terms of the inequality, in terms of the availability of these basic benefits to the large section of the population in terms of education, healthcare facilities, as well as basic housing needs, as well as basic amenities. Whereas it might happen that even if the income level is not that high, but still the people are having much more well distributed benefits of the economic growth in terms of better access to wide range of basic amenities and the facilities that are required to have a better developed capabilities to access anything or to approach anything that an individual wants. So if I give an example, the ideal example will be that of a Portugal and Sri Lanka. So if we look in terms of the growth, in terms of the per capita income, Portugal had at one point of time a much higher per capita income compared to that of Sri Lanka. But despite this, Sri Lanka had a much better quality of life in the quality of living index, which has been developed by UN and Cobb, which has been developed by these international developmental organizations, because Sri Lanka, the population of Sri Lanka had much better access to health, education and other basic amenities compared to their counterparts in Portugal. So it is so by this discussion we can understand that higher growth, growth in per capita income or higher per capita income, and even with a complete structural transformation, may not be a necessary condition for the individuals to enjoy even a better standard of living, because to enjoy the better standard of living you need the capabilities before you can enjoy those better standards, and to enjoy those better standards you need better capabilities, which can only happen when you have got access to all the basic, when there is a universal access to all the basic amenities, healthcare as well as the education facilities. So unless and until that is happening, even with sustained increase in per capita income, even with the structural transformation, people will still be in want of all the basic amenities that can help them or push them towards a better standard of living. So thank you for this, for listening to this introductory lecture on growth and development, and I hope that you have enjoyed this lecture, and I am grateful to you for your kind attention. So thank you once again.